former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and our senior counsel for global affairs is joining us. And Secretary Pompeo, I wanted to go right to this because on Tuesday we had Tim Walz telling donors he thinks the Electoral College should be eliminated. Now on Thursday he says that's not the position of the campaign. Is it just another extreme Harris-Walz position that they're letting their donors know, hey, wink, wink, this is what we're going to do if we get into office? Or do you think Tim Walz just got exposed for who he really is?
Look, I have no earthly idea what Tim Walz thinks about the Electoral College from what he said. I have no idea what the campaign's position from what he said. But we know this. This is a radical group of leaders in Harris and Walz who want to undermine all the foundational ideas that our republic was built on. And the Electoral College is one of those pillars. It's been with us since the beginning. Our founders understood why it was important that we have a system that wasn't a straight democracy with a popular vote across the entire nation. And I think your core point is right. Whatever they tell us in the coming days, whatever gaps they commit, they believe that the nation would be better served by undermining those central pillars of our republic, not supporting and continuing to build on them in the way we have for the last 250 years.
And to me, Secretary, that's because for those of us that live in what they consider like these flyover states, that where our population centers, we're growing right now, especially in states like where we are, and we've seen extreme population growth in the last 10 years, but we're still quite smaller than the coastal elite states. And I think they'd love to just see a straight up vote, which like you said, our founders knew from the beginning would not be the right way to get a representative democracy into the U.S. government, one that people believed was actually responding to them and that also looked like them, that mirrored them and mirrored their and understood their concerns.
You got it exactly right. Look, their mission is really simple. They want the nation to look more like California or New York or Chicago. Right. So they want the big urban centers to dominate American politics at the national level. They'd love to take away anything that allowed people who are from places like me in Kansas or people from the southern states, people from places that have a set of values that are deeply different than Harris and Walz's values. They want to eliminate us from the capacity to have and to shape political outcomes, and getting rid of the Electoral College would do precisely that.
And Mr. Secretary, just to reiterate that point for everyone is that he mentioned in that follow-up where he was trying to say that he wants it to be a position where everybody matters in the country instead of the 5 or 6 states that they campaign in at the end, when in reality, New York City itself, just the city, has more population than 39 states. So if you're only having to campaign in the largest cities in America, they are gaslighting the American people by saying if it's a popular vote, then everybody matters. In reality, it's quite the opposite.
If there was no Electoral College, nobody'd be campaigning in Michigan. They'd be campaigning in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh, but no place else in Pennsylvania. And in New York, they'd be campaigning in Manhattan and not even upstate New York. No, you're right. It would actually consolidate, diminish the number of places that and political views that would have to be acknowledged if you got rid of the Electoral College. That's why, look, if you go back, you read the Federalist Papers, our founders were very clear about this. You had an agrarian America, you had an urban America, and you had all kinds of different ideas. And they understood that a direct democracy would only lead to more chaos and an undermining of our democratic values and principles.
Secretary Pompeo, you have an article up at aclj.org called Biden and Harris Utterly Fail in the Wake of October 7th. And you make the case that Israel and America and the West are rooted in Judeo-Christian values, and that contrast between the jihadis in the Middle East. Is this an existential battle between good and evil? I mean, it seems like the right gets this and the Republican Party gets this, and most of its leaders understand this. But on the left, it just can kind of goes over their head. It's like this idea, and especially the further you get on to the further left you go, about just the basics of good and evil, like who the good guys are and who the bad guys are when it comes to what happened on October 7th. For most people, I think you could explain those events. Don't tell the people who was engaged in what side, and they could tell you easily who were the bad guys, who were the good guys.
Look, I think that's exactly right. You all know this. You remember And many of the listeners and viewers of ACLJ, you'll remember Barack Obama's apology tour back in 2010. The Harris Walz team is exactly that. They don't understand that America is a force for good, and they get confused. They get confused when they see the innocent civilians in Gaza being killed. They get confused about whose fault it is. They forget that the result of those deaths are the direct result of Iran forcing Hamas to continue its terrorist ways. They see people killed in Beirut and they say, oh my goodness, look at the Israelis, when in fact this was Hezbollah that caused those deaths. There are too few in the bubble inside of Washington, D.C. who are prepared to say there is a bright line between good and evil. We know who the good guys and the bad guys are, and we are going to relentlessly, with all of our energy, defend the good guys and make sure that the good guys prevail. And we all need to, as people who come from this understanding, this Judeo-Christian tradition here in America, we need to be always on the side of good. And that means never becoming morally confused about this conflict between Israel and these terrorists.
Secretary Pompeo, people are already voting in some states, voting early. Absentee ballots are going out. We have 25 days left as of today going into this weekend. To a message to our listeners, they want to know, a lot of them, what they can do right now to help good conservative candidates win, whether it's in their state, whether it's at the national level. What would you tell them to do?
So I've also already voted. I would urge them, if they've got time and the space, go vote now, get it over, make sure it happens. If you have a bad weather day on the 5th, you don't want to be stuck. I want to make sure that every conservative believer gets out there and votes. I give them 3 ideas. 1, go make sure your friends do the same. Get them to vote. Remind them it's time. We're in the middle of this campaign right now. The election is well underway. 2nd, pray for our candidates. Pray for their continued courage and wisdom. Pray that their families don't grow tired in these last few weeks. It's going to be tough. The media onslaught will be very real. And then lastly, never forget that this election matters an awful lot. We have to do our best to get it right. And the mechanism by which we do that is to vote, encourage others to vote, and then help those leaders be successful. If you can find a candidate and you can go out and help them, whether that is for city council or county commission or school board, wherever it may be, go encourage them, go help them. And you will benefit from it personally, but more importantly, your community, your state, and our country will benefit from that greatly.
Absolutely right. Thank you, Secretary Pompeo, for being part of our team and for taking the time today to talk to the folks out there. I mean, with this 25 days left, it's very important. And I think what Secretary Pompeo said at the end is truly important. You don't have to say, oh, I've got to go find a Senate campaign or a presidential campaign that needs my help. Those local campaigns, because getting out those voters for that city council race could be the group of voters, and a couple campaigns like that could be the vote number that tips the scales for who takes the state for all those presidential electoral votes. So don't think you're just working with a local election. You're not in these type of elections. So get out there and volunteer. Make sure you voted as early as you can, I think, in this election. We've seen the weather. We've seen the issues. Get your friends to do it. And, of course, support the worker organizations that are going to be there leading up to the election and the day after and the hours after, ready to fight if we have to in court at aclj.org.